You guys ready? Said it's the what again?
30th night of Rajab.
Yeah.
Bismillah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi wahdahu. والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. As we continue, as we continue in the explanation of the great Imam Taqiyuddin Ahmad ibn Abdul Halim ibn Abdul Salam ibn Taymiyyah al-Harrani al-Dimashqi rahimahullah, the one who died 728 at the migration of our Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. At the time now, 7:55 p.m., Wednesday, March the 2nd, 2022, which agrees with the Islamic calendar, which is the night, technically, Thursday, Laylatul Khamis, the night of Thursday, whereas now the 30th of Rajab, which is after Rajab and Sha'ban, then it's Ramadan. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to reach another month of Ramadan. For now, it's the 30th of Rajab, where technically, like we said, it's Thursday night, and the year is 1443 after the migration of our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. We finish, or rather we continue, we continue, but the great Imam that he goes on the side, Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah, he said, وَمِنْهُ مَنْ يَقُولُ بَلِ الرَّسُولُ عَلِمَهَا وَلَكِنْ لَمْ يُبَيِّنْهَا وإنما تكلم بما يناقضها وأراد من الخلق فهم ما يناقضها لأن مصلحة الخلق في هذه الاعتقادات التي لا تطابق الحق. So let's read the first paragraph and translate it. He says, there's from amongst them, I forgot to mention the previous. I'm sorry everyone. I apologize. If you turn the page back, just when we stopped at last class, I forgot to mention something important. We were speaking about the people of imagination that Shaykh al-Islam is speaking about. He said that amongst the groups who break down into types, or different types, who fell into or have their portion of degrading the Prophet ﷺ by their ideologies, by the beliefs that they have, which are incorrect, which are in opposition to the religion. And he said that they break down to different types. I want to read this so we can be caught up, so everyone can understand what we're speaking about. He said, وَأَمَا الْمُنْحَرِفُونَ عَنْ طَرِيقِهِمْ فَهُمْ ثَلَاثُ طَوَائِفٍ. As for those who deviated, meaning from amongst those Muslims who fell into some type of discrepancies in their fundamentals, he said, for those who deviated from the correct path, for verily there are three groups. He said, number one is Ahlu Takhyili, the people of imagination. We talked about this last class. He said, Ahlu Takhyil. Then you have Ahlu Ta'wil, and you have Ahlu Tajheel, people of imagination, people of false interpretations, and people of ignorance. So then he explains by saying, فَأَهْلُ التَّخْيِيلِ هُمُ الْمُتَفَلْسِفَةِ وَمَنْ سَلَكَ سَبِيلَهُم مِنْ مُتَكَلِّمٍ وَمُتَصَوِّفٍ. He said, as for the people of imagination, meaning that they follow their imagination, there's no reality to what they believe. He said, for verily they are the philosophers and those who embarked upon their path from the people of rhetoric and the people who have been affected by tasawwuf. Tasawwuf meaning what, everyone? The people of mysticism, or what they call the people of Sufiya. He said, for verily, then he explains why. فإنهم يقولون إنما ذكره الرسول من أمر الإيمان بالله واليوم الآخر إنما هو تخييل للحقائق لينتفع به الجمهور لا لأنه بين به الحق ولا هدى به الخلق ولا أوضح الحقائق. He said, for verily these people, they say, verily what the Messenger of Allah mentioned, alayhi salatu wasalam, from the affairs of belief in Allah and the day of resurrection, verily is an imagination for those realities that he said. It's meaning they're not real. Meaning the day of resurrection is not real. Or people eating in paradise is not real. Or what the Messenger of Allah conveyed of those names and attributes of Allah, the apparent meaning is not what he intended. Or that wasn't the reality. You'll find that these affairs are truly imaginative. Because what the Messenger of Allah came with, of what affairs, when agreeance, what was in the affairs, what is agreeance to reality, that is what was intended. For example, that Allah created the heavens and the earth within 6 days, and then he ascended above the Arsh. That's truly what happened. It's not imaginative. Rather, what they say is imaginative. Or they saying, for example, that Allah Ta'ala, on the day of resurrection, that the actual physical aspect will not be real. All those affairs are what? Nonsense. The people will be resurrected in their physical form. The souls will be put back in their bodies. And everyone will be embarking upon their accountability for what they did in this world. Simple. What the Messenger of Allah said was clear. When they come with these type of false ideologies, this what causes confusion in the minds of people. So, what they're trying to say is, he said, these are people of imagination for the reality. He said, but what the Messenger of Allah conveyed, that was only for specific people. That's what Shaykh al-Islam is mentioning here. He said, in order that the majority benefit by what he said, meaning it was only for them. But the reality of what he intended truly, only certain people knew. Which is absolute nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. What the Messenger of Allah, what he conveyed was for everyone. Whether they be from those who have knowledge, or whether they be from the common folk, everybody are obliged to understand these affairs exactly the same. There's no difference between that one doesn't believe, or these people only believe there's a day of resurrection physically, but those who are in knowledge know that that's not what the Messenger of Allah intended. He intended something else. All absolute nonsense. So listen. So that's the reason why Shaykh al-Islam is saying this. He said, لِأَنَّهُ بَيَّنَ بِهِ الْحَقِّ. He said that was for the majority. That's not because the Messenger of Allah actually clarified the truth. Nor was he guided by that knowledge he was given of revelation, the creation. Nor did he give clarity to the true reality of affairs. So basically they're saying that the Messenger of Allah, what he conveyed outwardly was for a specific group of people. But behind the closed curtains, that's not what he intended. So that's what he's mentioning here. He said those groups have been affected by, or those who are affected by, Greek philosophy. They're affected by Greek philosophy. And those who are upon Sufiyyah, those who are upon mysticism, from those groups of the deviant sects who've been affected by, like we said, Tasawwuf or Sufiyyah, they have these type of what? Beliefs. Now listen what he goes on to say about them. Shaykh al-Islam considers them people of imagination, meaning they're delusional. They believe affairs that there's no reality to it. So what does that mean? It's just a figment of your imagination. So he's saying, ثم هم على قسمين منهم من يقول إن الرسول لم يعلم الحقائق على ما هي عليه. From amongst them, they say, indeed, the Messenger of Allah did not have knowledge of the reality of those affairs or what they truly are upon. He says, and they say, Inna min al-falasifati al-ilahiyya man alimaha. So, then he goes on to say, he said, rather, now listen to this, al-falasifati al-ilahiyya. Al-falasifati al-ilahiyya. He said, for verily, there is from what do you call it? Ilahi? How do you translate it? Ilahiyah. Verily is now. Alhamdulillah, just came to my mind. Verily is from divine philosophy. From the divine philosophy. This is what they said. There's people from the divine or have divine philosophy who has knowledge of that. So it's actually saying that there are people that had knowledge of an affair that the Messenger of Allah didn't have. That was from those Greek philosophers, those of people that have been affected by Greek philosophy or adopted those ways, that they were more knowledgeable than the Messenger of Allah in regards to these matters. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? This is what they're saying. He said, وَكَذَلِكَ مِنَ الْأَشْخَاصِ. So he's talking about those who've been affected by Greek philosophies, from those Muslims who adopted this knowledge. And they're still prevalent to this day. They're still prevalent to this day, who've been affected by Greek philosophy, and they tried to incorporate it in a religion until they made that the source of guidance instead of revelation. And this is where the atrocities crept in. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? So this is what he goes on to say. وَكَذَلِكَ مِنَ الْأَشْخَاصِ الَّذِينَ يُسَمُّونَهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءَ مَنْ عَلِمَهَا وَيُزْعُمُونَ أَنَّ مِنَ الْفَلَاسِفَةِ أَوِ الْأَوْلِيَاءِ مَنْ هُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. So now he's going to talk about the Sufis, the second group who Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah called the people of imagination. What he called Ahl al-Takhyil. He said, likewise, from the people who call them awliya. Who's he speaking about? The Sufis. Because you'll find that the Sufis call their so-called Mashaykh al-Turuq, or their scholars of their so-called tariqah, or their way. They call them awliya, or mawla. He said, for those people who they called awliya, those who they consider their scholars, so-called, he said, from amongst them who say, al-ashkhas alladhina yusammunahum awliya man alimaha, rather they had knowledge of the affair and of the affairs that the Messenger of Allah didn't know about either. So you got the philosophers who say it, and then you have the who? The Sufis who say it. He says, وَيَزْعُمُونَ أَنَّ مِنَ الْفَلَاسِفَةِ أَوِ الْأَوْلِيَاءِ مَنْ هُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِاللَّهِ. He says, rather they claim is that from the philosophers and the awliya, who's more knowledgeable than Allah, who's more knowledgeable concerning Allah and the day of resurrection than the prophets and the messengers. He said that these are the statements of the extremists of the mulhideen, of the extremists of those who are upon great deviance or deep levels of deviance from the philosophers and the Batiniyah, rather they be from the Batiniyah to Shia or the Batiniyah wa al-Sufiyah. And we'll talk about that in a minute. We already spoke about some of the Batiniyah a couple of weeks ago. Who are they? And we said that the Batiniyah is incumbent upon the Muslims to have knowledge of these affairs, because that was the nation of Islam adopted their ideologies from. The nation of Islam adopted their ideologies from the Batiniyah. And the group called the Batiniyah, they were called specifically Hamdan Qirmilt. Hamdan Qirmilt, his group was called the Qaramita, where they believe that Allah came in the form of a man, which is similar to what the nation of Islam believed. They believe Farad Muhammad was the name of a man, right? And that there were two human beings that they came together and they had intimacy between themselves, who was named Alfonso and Baby G in the hills of Europe somewhere. And until she became pregnant with Allah, his name was Farad Muhammad, right? To the end of it. They also twist up the meanings of the prayer, as they don't pray like the Muslims pray. They raise their hands or what have you in a certain manner, even though some of them are trying to change it so they can be a little bit more sneaky, so the people can know maybe they embrace the true Islam. But the original nation of Islam years ago, that's how they used to pray. They used to pray with their hands up like this. And if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, they didn't face Mecca. I think they faced Detroit or Chicago or something like that. Chicago. They faced Chicago. And they raised with their hands like this, and they would pray Ramadan, like the 25th or something to that effect. And they believe there's no day of resurrection. It's over and over as soon as you die. That's it. And that the second coming is the mothership. Listen to all this nonsense. So at any rate, you'll find that the origin of these affairs came from the Qaramita, from the Batiniyah. It was a deviant sect, and Allah knows best. That's where Elijah Muhammad extracted his ideologies, taking advantage of African Americans here by extracting these ideologies from the Batiniyah. Then he came and he wanted to take advantage of them by taking advantage of their emotions and their oppression from what was taking place of great racism, and he capitalized on it, which is very evil. That you would take advantage of the emotions of the people and for some financial gain and power over them, knowing the fact that they've been oppressed in this country in a certain way, or rather in a lot of ways, and capitalizing on that, which is most evil of affairs, by teaching them an affair that's worse than what was being done to them, of tyranny. Is worse that you're calling the people to dwell in the hellfire forever, because that was a call to the call to hell, in order to so-called solve the problems of African Americans. So now you took them from one tyranny to the greatest form, which is dwelling in the hellfire forever. Because if the people died upon those type of ideologies, that's where they would have ended up. So those are the matters that people have to realize. That is the reason why we're teaching this book, and why Shaykh al-Islam talks about these certain matters. Because a Muslim, once he's educated in these matters, he can be on guard for those who say that they're Muslim, but they're coming with some perverted version of it. Is it clear, everyone? Fine. So what he goes on to say, he says, وَالْبَاطِنِيَّةُ الشِّيعَةُ وَالْبَاطِنِيَّةُ الصُّوفِيَّةُ. So he's talking about the different groups from the Batiniyah, because you do have the Batiniyah from the Shia, who are called the Ismailiyah. The Ismailiyah. We'll talk about them in a minute. And the Batiniyah Sufiya, such as we spoke about, Hamdan, Pyramid. And actually they were a form of the Khawarij. They were from the Khawarij. They used to kill innocent bystanders, kill them, and they Hamdan Pyramid also stole the black stone from Mecca. He came to Mecca and he stole it. And he also stuffed, like we said, the well of Zamzam with dead bodies. And he also killed numerous of innocent people. And he said that Allah doesn't exist, nor does he not exist. Rather, he does. That's exactly what he said. They say Allah is not mawjood, nor is he ma'doom. He doesn't exist, nor does he not exist. All these other affairs, which are considered the whispers and the calls of the devil. Is it clear, everyone? Because that's all it is. It's the calls and the whispers of the devil to the people can deviate so they can die in a manner that's displeasing to Allah. That's what there is down to. Is it clear, everyone? Fine. So Shaykh al-Islam goes on to say, so now this is where we started today. He said, وَمِنْهُمْ, so let's continue. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَقُولُ بَلِ الرَّسُولُ عَلِمَهَا لَكِنْ لَمْ يُبَيِّنْهَا. He said, from amongst them who say, rather the Messenger of Allah had knowledge of it, however he didn't clarify it. So now they're accusing the Messenger of Allah of being deficient of his knowledge in regards to Allah. That's number one. And so they went from one major error to another major error. They went from one major error to another major error. So if you say that the Messenger of Allah's knowledge was deficient in regards to Allah, so basically the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam was conveyed, or knowledge in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not convey the affair completely for the creation in order for the Messenger of Allah to have knowledge of it. So it's as if the matter was incomplete. So the Messenger of Allah, they want to say that he was deficient in his knowledge of concerning revelation, which is, like we said, the utmost of nonsense. So then, notice he goes on to say, لَكِنْ لَمْ يُبَيِّنْهَا. However, the Messenger of Allah didn't clarify. So they went from one major mistake to another major mistake. As we know, as our belief a couple of pages ago, we believe that the Messenger of Allah was complete in his knowledge in regards to Allah, because he was the Prophet and the Messenger of Allah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Allah revealed to him all of the knowledge concerning what the creation need to be properly guided by. And that the Messenger of Allah, when you say Muhammad is the Messenger of Allah, you believe that he, alayhi salatu wasalam, conveyed it in the most perfect manner, and that the Messenger of Allah was the most knowledgeable of the creation concerning Allah. Then Allah Ta'ala, he said, well, the message of Allah said, authentic hadith with Bukhari, he said, "Ana akhshakum lillah wa taqakum lah." I am the most fearful of Allah from amongst you and the most pious. When the message of Allah said that, that implies he's the most knowledgeable. Why? Because there's no way that a person can truly fear Allah except upon knowledge. You cannot fear Allah upon ignorance. You cannot fear Allah upon ignorance. You only can fear Allah upon knowledge. Rather, your fear of worship of Allah upon ignorance or fear of Allah upon ignorance is condemned in our religion. Is it clear, everyone? Fine. So, this is what he goes on to say. He says, لَكَنْ لَمْ يُبَيِّنْهَا وَلَكِنْ تَكَلَّمَ بِمَا يُنَاقِضُهَا. He said he didn't clarify. So now they're accusing the message of Allah. If he didn't clarify it, that means he what? He betrayed his trust that he was given as a prophet and messenger. So he kept something hidden. So that necessitates that he what? That he didn't fulfill his mission. Nor did he what? Carry out his trust as it was what? As he was commanded. So that's now he went from one atrocity. So now he went from deficiency of his knowledge now to what? Him being treacherous. He didn't clarify. Fine. So this is what he goes to say. وَإِنَّمَا تَكَلَّمَ بِمَا يُنَاقِضُهَا. Basically the message of Allah was speaking in a manner of what? The true reality is something else. Is it clear, everyone, what I'm saying? He's saying one thing, but the true reality is something else. Something totally different. Or it's the total opposite of what he's saying. It says, تَكَلَّمَ بِمَا يُنَاقِضُهَا وَأَرَادَ بِالْخَلْقِ فَهْمَ مَا يُنَاقِضُهَا. However, he wanted from the creation to understand what goes against what he was truly saying. A person that has any sound intellect will be like, this doesn't make any sense. But the reality is, brothers and sisters, this happens amongst a lot of Muslim countries. And there's Muslims here in this country that believe this also. You would think that it's an affair that you would think that they would avoid, but there are thousands, if not millions of Muslims that believe this. They truly believe this. Why? Because they warn against these type of books, and they warn against Shaykh Taymiyyah, and they warn against them because they know that being educated in these type of matters will expose them, expose their reality. Fine. So he goes on to say, وَأَرَادَ بِالْخَلْقِ فَهْمَ مَا يُنَاقِضُهَا لِأَنَّ مَصْلَحَةَ الْخَلْقِ. He said because the reality of the benefit of the creation lies in these beliefs that he conveyed, but it's not agreeance to the truth actually. It's something else intended. So he goes on to say, ويقول هؤلاء يجب على الرسول أن يدعو الناس إلى اعتقاد التجسيم مع أنه باطل. He said it's obligatory upon the message of Allah to call the people to the belief of what he said outwardly, which was the truth. But what they're saying is, what the message of Allah, he had to call to something incorrect. He had to. That's what he had to do. So what he was calling to is to affairs that necessitates that Allah has body parts. That's what they say. We believe otherwise. We're saying, for example, that what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he has, for example, a face, which is in the book of Allah, which is in the Quran. Is it a face like the creation? No. But in their minds, they think that when you say face, it necessitates what? A human face, which isn't the case. So that's what they're saying. They say that the message of Allah conveyed it with that which you hear, that Allah has a face in a manner that befits His majesty. It doesn't resemble the face of the creation. But in their minds, when you say face, that means it's a body. So the message of Allah had to say that, even though it's false. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? So basically, he's giving examples of saying how the message of Allah sallallahu said something, but in actuality, he intended something else. Is it clear, everyone, what I'm saying? Right, so this he goes on to say, وَالْاعْتِقَادِ مَعَادِ الْأَبْدَانِ مَعْ أَنَّهُ بَاطِلٌ. He was also obliged to call the people to the belief that the bodies, or the physical bodies, will be resurrected, even though that's also incorrect. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? He says, وَيُخْبِرُهُمْ بِأَنَّ أَهْلَ الْجَنَّةِ يَأْكُلُونَ. He had to also convey to the people that the inhabitants of paradise will eat and drink, even though that's also incorrect. He says, لأنه لا يمكن دعوة الخلق إلا بهذه الطريقة. He said, there's no way that the people can be called to what's correct except by this method, meaning treachery. I had to tell you what sounds good, but that's not what's intended. So he said he had to use this way in order to get the people to what? Accept the truth. Basically, to lie. What I say is outward, but what I intend is something totally different, which is absolute nonsense. So he said, التي تتضمن, this is what Shaykh al-Islam is saying. He said what it contains is lying in order for the greater benefit of the people. He said, فهذا قول هؤلاء في نصوص الإيمان بالله واليوم الآخر. He said, for verily this is the statement of these people as it pertains to the text of faith in Allah and the day of resurrection. This is what they say. He says, وَأَمَّا الْأَعْمَالِ فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يُقِرُّهَا وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يُجْرِيهَا هَذَا الْمَجْرَى وَيَقُولُ إِنَّمَا يُؤْمَرُ بِهَا بَعْضُ النَّاسِ دُونَ بَعْضٍ. He said, now as for the actions, when he's talking about the obligatory actions, such as fasting, Ramadan, or such as praying 5 times a day and the likes of that. So now he goes on from belief, now he's talking about what? The actions. So he's saying from amongst them who's saying, they acknowledge that. فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يُقِرُّهَا. They acknowledge it. They say, okay, we know it's obligatory for everybody. He said from amongst them who say, it comes in this way, however, that's only for a specific group of people. Some more confusion, here we go, right? إِنَّمَا يُؤْمَرُ بِهَا بَعْضُ النَّاسِ. Verily, there was only certain people that were commanded to carry it out without others. He says, this is what the common folk were commanded to do. For example, praying 5 times a day. For example, staying away from fornication and marrying and having children and families. And fasting for the month of Ramadan. However, that's not what's intended by the group who has truly attained a high level of so-called Iman. Once they reach that level, they don't have to do that anymore. He said, this is the methodology of the Batiniyah, from those who are upon great deviation, and the Ismailiyah. The Ismailiyah and others submitted to them. The Ismailiyah, everyone, they were a deviant sect of the Shia. A deviant sect from the Shia. They were called a Shi'atul Batiniyah. A Shi'atu what? Al-Batiniyah. This group was ascribed to an individual named Muhammad ibn Ismail ibn Ja'far. Muhammad ibn Ismail ibn Ja'far. They claim that the imamah, as we know that the Shia, they believe in the 12 great imams, so-called, that can conduct in this existence. And they can create from non-existence into existence, which is something that is totally evil. That's affairs of lordship. That's not worship. That's something on a higher level. The thing that put the people in the past in the hellfire was in worship, where they was committing polytheism and the aspect of worship of Allah. But you'll find that a lot of those from the past, especially during the time of the message of Allah from the polytheists, did not believe this belief. They didn't believe that something other than Allah can conduct in this existence or bring something from non-existence into existence, or conduct in any shape, form, or fashion in this existence. They didn't believe that at all. And despite of that, they still went to the hellfire forever. Why? Because they took between them and Allah mediators and intercessors that draw them close to Allah. But they didn't believe that other than Allah creates or sustains or what have you. These people went to another extreme, which is the belief that the 12 so-called great imams can conduct in this existence of good and evil. They can make things happen. They can allow good to happen, or great events to happen, or catastrophic affairs to take place for certain people or certain nations, or certain good to take place in certain nations, to the end of it. That's polytheism on another level. Right? But at any rate, this individual, Muhammad ibn Ismail ibn Ja'far, his followers claim that the affair of the imamah actually ended up with him. The affair of the imamah, or the role play of the imamah, so-called, came to him. Why? Because he's the seventh. The seventh. And why do they say the seventh? What was so significant about the seventh? He said because the heavens are how many? 7. The earths are how many? 7. The days during the week are how many? 7. Which is an indication of the role of this individual, or the role of the imams that they carry out, or they executed by what? 7. So they say that Allah doesn't exist, nor does Allah not exist, or that Allah is not knowledgeable, nor is Allah ignorant, to the end of the nonsense. Likewise, they say that about His names, about the Allah His names and characteristics, from the other different atrocities and evils they believe. So the problem is here. This is where I'm going to go with it, because I don't want to lose track in sight of why we're speaking about it. He said the problem that why Shaykh al-Islam mentioned it here in this context. He said أن الظاهر للعوام, that the apparent obligations that the Messenger of Allah said, that was only for the common folk. And the batin, or the so-called secrets, or of what was truly intended, are only for specific people, or exclusive people. And those people, once they reach a certain level, they don't have to what? Do it anymore. They don't have to pray anymore, they don't have to fast anymore, they don't have to do none of that. And you'll find that that Shaykh, the great Imam, Shaykh Muhammad al-Jahabi, rahimahullah, he said, those people who sought knowledge at the hands of these individuals, he said what's crazy is they worked real hard and they still didn't graduate to the level where they could stop praying. He said they couldn't reach the level, they were so hardworking until the point where he didn't let them pass. No, you haven't reached this level yet, where you can stop praying, stop fasting, stop fornicating, or you got to get married anymore. You have to do that no more. You can do whatever. It's just absolute filth. All of this is basically to reach the level of becoming like a shaitan. That's all it is. To reach the level of being a shaitan. But so it goes on to say, he said the ultimate goal, if you want to say, is just to nullify the religion, nullify the obligations that every human being has to carry out on a daily basis, and just to basically rip off of yourself the practice of the religion. That's the ultimate goal of it. So ultimately, like we said, these affairs were all evil, which Shaykh al-Islam mentioned these matters so the Muslims could be on guard against it. Because there was no prophet or any messenger that Allah sent, except all of them worship Allah, all of them pray all the way up to their last breath. There is no certain point where you reach a high level of iman until all the obligations that Allah obliged from the people that you have to now remove it or stop practicing it. Is it clear, everyone? There's not a prophet without any exception or messenger, except that all of them all pray, all of them worship and stay steadfast upon the worship of Allah all the way up to their death. And there wasn't any time where you'll find in the books that were revealed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in His book or on the sunnah of any prophet that there will be a time where you don't have to do anything anymore. That's absolute nonsense. Is it clear, everyone? Jay. So, this is what he mentioned and said, we already talked about that, alhamdulillah. He said, also, the great Imam, Shaykh Muhammad al-Jami, will stop here, everyone, because I know it's getting late. They said, لِيَصْدُقُ هَذَا الْكَلَامِ لِلْفِعْلِ ظَهَرَ قَبْلَ فترة شخص يقال له محمود محمد طه في أم درمان ودعا إلى هذه الدعوة تماما. He said, certain people will try to say that these type of groups don't exist, but he said, I know specifically. He said that this speech that you're hearing exactly, that before, a moment of time or a time ago, there was an individual, his name was Mahmud Muhammad Taha. He was in an area called Dirman. He said, and he called to this calling exactly. And he claimed that the message of Allah, somebody's phone. He claimed that the message of Allah was sent with 2 messages. He said the first message he was commanded to convey, and that the companions understood it that way. and that the people know today of what you see the common folk practicing, or what you see everyone practicing. He said, however, there was another message that was left. He called it the second message. And what it contained is that zakah, that al-maqadir, saqita. He said that paying the alms to the poor that possess that specific amounts, it's removed. The obligation of it is gone. It's not obligatory. He said that all these obligations of working in accordance to the apparent text, that was only for the common folk, not for those who so-called reached a certain level from the exclusive. So they would leave off the prayer and abandon it, and they would abandon everything. And they would say to their so-called followers, work hard, just as we did. He says, وَصَلْنَا إِلَى مَا نَحْنُ فِيهِ. He said, you eventually reached the level where we reached. He says, أَمَّا أَنْتُمْ فَيَجِبُ أَن تَعْمَلُوا. As for you, you have to be very diligent. He says, to the point where a lot of people believe this. And a lot of people tried to follow them in order to attain or reach the level they attained. He said, however, they were prohibited and held back. Held back from what? From graduation. He said, مَنَعَهُمْ مِنَ التَّخَرُّجِ مَا تَخَرَّجْ أَحَدٌ عَلَى يَدِهِ إِلَىٰ أَنْ هَلَكَ. He said, no one graduated at his hands until he died. He said, وَلَكِنْ أَتْبَعُهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِهِ لَا يَزَالُوا مَوْجُودِينَ إِلَى هَذَا الوقت. وهناك لقاءات ومحاضرات ومناقشات جرت بيني وبينه. The great Imam, that goes on to say, Shaykh Muhammad Aman Jami, he said his followers that so-called believed in him, he said they're still present to this day. He says in his meetings and lectures and discussions had taken place between me and him. And he said, and I wrote to him a message and a refutation, and I read an advice. It was called Al-Muhadarat Al-Difa'iyah عن السنة المحمدية. It's called the defensive lecture defending the Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So for anyone who wants it, they can look and check with that the discussion and that refutation that he did with that individual Muhammad Mahmud Taha. He said even though he died, however, his ideas are still present and they're still being practiced today. And that is from those affairs in which you'll find in that certain area called Dirman, that you'll find a lot of those people are still being misled by. He said, for verily, a person needs to look at the message or the rebuttal that he had wrote in order for them to be in guard against those type of ways and those beliefs. Because they're the ways and the call of what everyone of Satan. To say basically the ultimate goal is basically to remove yourself from the religion. For what is the ultimate goal of a human being if he hopes to achieve basically nothingness in the end? I don't have to fear Allah in the end. The ultimate goal is I don't have to fear Allah at all. So then he goes on to say, let's flip the page and we'll stop, inshallah. So, Shaykh al-Islam, just to sum it up, everyone, he talked about people of what? Imagination. They call ahlu what? Tahyeel. The people of imagination. People of imagination are who? The Sufis and the philosophers. And those who, from the Sufis, go upon Batiniyah. And from the Shia. He called them people of imagination. Because they claim that the Messenger of Allah did not have complete knowledge in regards to his Lord. Or if the Messenger of Allah did have knowledge of it, he didn't convey it. Rather, it was something else intended. Or the outward conveyment was what the common folk were supposed to believe in order to basically trick them and fool them into believing it. But however, something else was intended. Which is absolute all what? Utter nonsense. So then he goes on to say the second category. And we'll read this and we'll stop. The second category for the people of imagination, he says, is the people of false interpretations or distorted interpretations called Ahl al-Ta'wiyah. He said, فَيَقُولُونَ إِنَّ النُّصُوصَ الْوَارِدَةَ فِي الصِّفَاتِ لَمْ يَقْصِدْ بِهَا الرَّسُولُ. He says, أَنْ يَعْتَقِدَ النَّاسُ الْبَاطِلَ وَلَكِنْ قَصَدَ بِهَا مَعَانِي ولم يبين لهم تلك المعاني ولا دلهم عليها ولكن أراد أن ينظروا فيعرفوا الحق بعقولهم ثم يجتهدوا في صرف تلك النصوص عن مدلولها. So he said, the people of false, distorted interpretations of the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah. He said, they say that the text that's been narrated in regards to Allah's attributes, that's not what the Messenger of Allah intended. That so-called, the people firmly believe falsehood. So basically what the Messenger of Allah, what he conveyed in actuality was falsehood. However, what he truly intended was other meanings. And he didn't clarify those meanings, nor did he indicate towards it. However, he wanted that the people look and ponder and know the truth by their minds. By their minds. So they were left to their intellects. By their minds. So the intellect was given precedence over what everyone? What Allah revealed. So that's used as the what? The source. That's used as the source of guidance, not actually what Allah revealed. طيب. He said, ثم يجتهد في صرف تلك النصوص عن مدلولها. He said, then when the people realize this with their minds, then they work hard in order to take those texts out of what they truly indicate. To remove it. Outside what they truly mean. You know, distorting the meaning, which is called ta'wil. وَمَقْصُودُهُ امْتِحَانُهُمْ وَتَكْلِيفُهُمْ وَإِتْعَابْ أَذْهَانِهِمْ وَعُقُولِهِمْ في أن يصرفوا كلامه عن مدلوله ومقتضاه ويعرف الحق من غير جهته. واو. وهذا قول المتكلمة الجهمية والمعتزلة ومن دخل معهم في شيء من ذلك. Then he goes on to say, and this will stop at inshallah. He said, وَمَقْصُودُهُ, what the message of Allah's intention was, what he intended is just to test them. To test them. So, when they hear that Allah has a face or that Allah Ta'ala has these characteristics, he never intended none of this. This was just a test. He just wanted to test them, and he wanted to burden them, and he wanted to also render their minds exhausted and their intellects exhausted. في أن يصرفوا كلامه. He says so that the people would take his speech out of what it truly indicated and what it necessitated. So they know the truth from other than him, meaning that they take the message of Allah so they can realize that he's not the true source of guidance. It's something else. It's the people's minds. It's the people's intellects. He said this is the statement of the people of rhetoric from the Jahmiyyah. The people are called Mutakallima. From the deviant sect called the Jahmiyyah, and the Mu'tazila from the people of rhetoric. And those who enter upon their way of anything of the sort. Is it clear, everyone? So basically they share the people of imagination and the people of false interpretations. What is Shaykh al-Islam? Let's give more examples of this. For example, they're saying that the Messenger of Allah, when he said that Allah, in the book of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the heaven, Allah خلق السماوات والأرض وما بينهما في ستة أيام ثم استوى على العرش. Allah is the one that created the heavens and the earth within 6 days and what is between them. Then he ascended above the throne. Allah. So that's what the message of Allah conveyed it to you. But that's not what is intended. What is intended is Allah did not ascend, Allah conquered it. Allah conquered the throne. Or Allah dominated the throne. Which is absolute nonsense. Why is it nonsense? When you hear the word conquered or dominated, it means that there was something in his existence or his kingdom that belonged to other than him. That he had to get it back. Which is absolute nonsense. There's nothing in the heavens and the earth that Allah created that wasn't in his ownership, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Where he had to fight someone who created it that he created in order to get it back. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? Doesn't make absolutely any sense. So Allah created the throne and he created someone to take it from him in order to get it back from that thing he created. You understand the nonsense? This is what these people are saying. So he's saying that Allah, the Prophet ﷺ said this, but that's not what's intended. Something else is intended. Or that Allah said in his book, in the Quran, وَمَا يَا إِبْلِيسَ مَا مَنَعَكَ أَن تَسْجُدَ لِمَنْ خَلَقْتُ بِيَدَيْهِ أَسْتَكْبَرْتَ أَمْ كُنْتَ مِنَ الْعَالِينَ. For example, Allah in his book said, O Iblis, what prevented you from prostrating to the one that I created with my two hands? So, the Prophet ﷺ conveyed that Allah revealed to him that Allah has two hands. But they say, no, that's not what's intended. Allah did not mean two hands. The message of Allah, this is what he said to you. But what he's intended is something else. What is it that he intended by something else? What he means by it is two bounties or two blessings. Not two hands. What's outward, that's not what's intended. What's intended is two blessings or two powers or two abilities. But what's your evidence in? First, number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in his book, وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. Allah says in his book, if you was to count the blessings of your Lord, you will not be able to enumerate them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not just have two bounties. His bounties cannot be counted. So that's false. Now, if you want to say it means two abilities, where do you find in the book of Allah that Allah has two abilities or two powers? You will never find it. So that's what I'm saying. You'll find that in order to distort the meaning of the word hand, they use their what? What did they use? The intellect. My intellect can't grasp two hands. Two hands, it just sounds like human hands to me. That's the reason why I can't accept it. So that's the reason why what? I distort it. Is it clear?
Then they try to distort the word yad, like yadun. You was trying to say something like
the word what again? I'm sorry.
Yadun, like hand, like ayadun. How you say hand?
Yet.
Plural, right? Yeah. Then they try to use.
You got yet, yadan, and aidin.
So then they try to use the linguistical meaning, like they try to distort, like ain't that where it came from?
Hold on. Keep going. I'm just waiting for you to get it all out.
Yeah, because now I'm just trying to know what I read about.
What it is the word aidin. They use the ayah, that power. Right? There's an ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in his book, be aidin. What we created the heavens and earth, be aidin. Wa inna lamusi'un. In that's not the word hand. They use that ayah. Truly, the word aid, the verb, the masdar does mean power. That particular word. In that context. Which is true. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did create certain things by his power. That's true. Absolutely. However, number one, everything that Allah created with his hand is by his power, but not everything created by his power is by his hand. I want to talk about, and we'll talk about that later. What do I mean by that? The reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to show Iblis there was something special about Adam, that why I'm telling you to prostrate, he was given something special over everything else. What was it that he created with his two hands? That was the distinguishing factor of why he wanted Iblis to what? Prostrate to him. He said, number one, out of submitting to revelation. Number two, to show that Allah Ta'ala, that special factor, which is what? They created him with his two hands. Except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates everything by his power and his ability. Everything. However, when Allah created something with his hand, with his two hands, is something special about that. That goes up another level. Hence, Allah created everything by his power. That's the reason why we'll talk about that all the texts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Sunnah that He created him with His hand. Leave him. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created him with His hand. That if we was to say that hand means power, these type of texts about Adam, there would be no meaning to it. What do we mean by that? There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that he said about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created things with His hand. For example, the hadith which comes in, if you can even mention this in Mukhtasar al-Ulum by the great Imam al-Dhahabi, he even mentioned this. He said Allah created three things with His hand. He said, خَلَقَ آدَمْ بِيَدِهِ وَخَطَّ لَهُ التَّوْرَاةِ بِيَدِهِ وَغَرَسَ شَجَرَةَ الْجَنَّةِ بِيَدِهِ. The hadith where it comes in where it says that the Messenger of Allah said that Allah created three things, or did those affairs with His hand. Number one is Adam. He created Adam with His hand. He also wrote the Torah with His hand. And the garden or the trees of paradise was also planted by His hand. But what's so special about these three things? Is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them with His what? Jinn. Now, let's keep in mind power. Or ability, rather. Ability. Say ability. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created everything in the heavens and the earth. With His what? By His what? By His power or ability. Right? If we said that hand means power or ability, as they say, that would mean there's nothing special about that hadith. You've taken it, you removed it. Everything that Allah created by His hand, He created by His power and ability. But not everything that Allah created by His power and His ability, He created by His hand. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? Everything Allah created by His hand, He created by His power and ability. But not everything He created by His power and ability, He created by His hand, except for those things that were mentioned in the Sunnah, such as Adam, and such as what? The tree of paradise, or the tree in Aden, and as it says in the hadith, in Aden, the Jannah to Aden, and the third thing is what? The Torah. So that's what they say. If it means power, then that would necessitate that the thing in which He told Iblis, to the point where the Imam al-Dhahabi even said, if this hadith had no meaning to it, that Allah did not create Adam with His hand, that would have gave an argument for Iblis against the law. What does he mean by that? Meaning, you created him with his power, just like you created me with his power. What's the difference? But however, Allah wanted to establish there was something special about Adam, which is what? He created him with his hand. But if you were to remove that factor, that would give some argument to who? To the devil. That would have gave an argument for him to argue with his Lord and be right about it. You told him you created him by his power. I got to prostrate to somebody you created with your own power. If it was the belief of what these people believe, that argument would have been what? Justified. So what's the difference between me and Adam? You created what is it? Since hand doesn't mean hand means power, or means two abilities, or what have you. That means what's the difference between me and him? What's so special? Let's remove the fact that he's created by hand, since it means power. So you created him by his power. You created me by your power and ability. What's the difference? So these are the arguments you'll find that they use to say that hands means power or two abilities or two power. It's all nonsense. It's unacceptable. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created these things by His hand to show there was something special about it, and it does not mean power. If that was the case, then the benefit that the Messenger of Allah formed these narrations will all be removed, gone. And there would be nothing equal as far as in regards to these special distinguishing factors or characteristics that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to these things in which He created His hand with, or created by His hand with. Is it clear, everyone? Yeah, but that's absolute nonsense. We'll talk about that later. Show us tomorrow's class. It's getting late. Any questions about the lesson, anyone? Hold on.
Can you repeat the statement again? You said everything created by His hand.
Everything Allah created by His hand is by His power or ability. Everything. Everything that Allah creates by His hand, automatically what comes into it? Power and ability. What comes along with that is Allah's qudrah. It comes along with Allah's qudrah. Anything that Allah created by His hand was also created by what? His ability. But not everything that Allah creates by His power and ability was created by His what? By His hand. From them is the earth. Did Allah create the heavens and the earth by His hand? No. That was just by His power and His what? That's it. But it was something special about these things specifically, in which Adam and the angels were created or commanded to prostrate. And that says in the verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, "Oh Iblis, what prevented you from prostrating to the one I created with my what? With my hands. With my two hands. Are you arrogant or are you from those who think that they are high? Astakbart am kunta min al-ali. Are you arrogant or are you from those who think that you're high?" No. We'll stop here inshallah. We'll continue tomorrow. Anything else left? We'll continue tomorrow inshallah. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.